Welcome back to the workshop, everyone. I know it's been a long time, and well, COVID-19, that's what we blame everything else on these days, so why not this? I've been busy in the workshop. My family's had me doing all kinds of honeydews, and mostly building bedroom furniture. And in the past when I've done it, I've used a lot of pocket screws. You know what, that starts getting a little expensive. And so I learned how to do another joint a little bit more effectively. I built myself a couple of jigs, and that joint is the floating tenon. And the floating tenon is a simple joint. It consists of two pieces, both of which have got mortises cut in them. And for that I use my jig here and my router. And then third piece is the floating tenon, which is just a wedge the same size as the mortise. So it goes in, you glue it in, it goes in, you glue the whole joint together, and you got yourself a nice square tight joint that's not going to go anywhere, and you don't have two screws sticking in it. Not that I don't still love pocket screws, but when you're doing, I don't know, 150 joints in a project, you don't necessarily want to spend that much money on hardware. Anyway, so the whole purpose of this video is building the jig. Now, let me give you a quick tour, and then I'll show you some of the things I did here. Okay, here is my mortise cutting jig. As you see, I've got a tabletop here, and it is a sliding tabletop. It is reversible, so I can do one size cut, and if I want to increase the size or decrease the size, I've got another size on the other side. I just have to turn it around. It's locked in place using a bicycle quick release, at least on this version. Tabletop also has a couple of router stops, so I can set the width of the cut and not have to worry about eyeballing it. So I just have to hit the stops and I'm ready to go. On the front side, I have a steady rest. It's a rest for the material we're going to cut. And basically, you see the material slides in, and then we've got a toggle clamp to lock it in place. This guy is held in place. It's adjustable up and down, and it's held in place once again with a couple of bicycle quick releases. In this case, I took a couple of wheel quick releases, threaded them all the way down using a 1032 die, cut them to size, and now I can adjust as I please. And then tighten it right down, no problem. All right, now the base of all this is it's a five-sided box. Okay, I've got a front plate. I have a top plate that sits underneath our table, two sides, and of course a bottom that is a little bit longer than the rest, so I have some place to attach the clamps. I've left the back side open so I can get to the quick release nut on the back side. So if I want to reverse the table, I just back it all the way off, undo the quick release nut, swing it around, and then put it all back together later. With a couple of extra pieces that I've made, all I have to do vertical cuts is undo my quick releases, swing this guy around, and you see I have side-to-side, ouch, that's still sharp down there. I have side-to-side slots also to allow me to move this in a vertical position and in and out depending on the size of the stock once again. It's really easy to build, and it's a few cuts on the stock on the table saw. Then all the slots are done using my router table. And then it's just a matter of assembling it. It's really easy to build. So let's take a look at all the cuts and all that good kind of stuff, and yeah, be right back.
Isana completed drawing her sword and came back to her feet. Her eyes sparkling with
Okay, now we're going to do the through cuts. And for doing the through cuts, I've got only a limited space that I want to cut, so I don't want to cut all the way across. So what I've done is I put in my spiral cutter, because I want 1/4-inch slots, and I've set it up with a little piece of painter's tape on my fence here, so I can mark off the center line. So I've got the center line of the bit over onto the painter's tape, and then I've drawn a line straight up, so now I can see where I want to start and stop the cut. On the workpiece, I've also got my lines cut up with a start and a stop point. So now it's a matter of doing a plunge cut, which means I'm going to start the router. I'm going to, on my start point, I'm going to set it up on the fence, lined up with the center. And I'm going to allow the router to cut the hole through, and then I'm going to slide it across and cut it all the way to my stop line. And then I'm going to repeat it on the other side. This is the technique I use for all through cuts using my router. And so you see it once, you only need to see it the one time. So here we go. That's all there is to it. Now I've got a slot that my carriage bolt or my quick release is going to slide in really, really nicely. And I will repeat the same for the box top, because not only does it get the runner slots on the bottom, it also gets a center slot for the tie down bolt. So some pin nails in just places that aren't going to get in my way later. There we go. Okay, I'm back again, and you can see that I've got all the excess waste cut off. I've got, whoops, a little chip came off of there. I've got holes drilled for my tie downs, so the sled is now locked down. In my router, I have placed, I don't know if you can see that. Well, I'm sure you can see it now. I placed a little V-cutter bit, and the depth is set so the tip of that V-cutter just hits the top of the sled. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a plunge. I'm going to run the router all the way across the workpiece, and what we're going to get is a cut-in center line for this router, and then we'll repeat for the other side. A couple of spots I kind of let up on the pressure, so I had to go back and do them again. But now I got that center line cut in. I can now mark it. And now when I use my cutter bit to cut all the way through, it should cut dead center on that line, and that line is for aligning the workpiece that we're going to be working with the cut, making it much easier than having to measure and draw out the mortise and all that good stuff. All right, I'm going to do this side and come back. Okay, what I've done since the last bit is I drilled our tie down holes. While I was at it, I trimmed off all the excess material on the edges. I still had a little bit more that I didn't notice the first time. I drilled the holes for the tie downs for my router stops, so that controls how big of a mortise I'm cutting. I also set up the extra tie downs on this side. So now we're at the point of needing to cut our mortise guide slot. Now, right now I've got a 1/4 inch bit set up in my router, a 1/4 inch spiral cut bit. I've got, from my center, I have measured out 3 plus another 5/8 because I want to make my slot about 1.5 inches long. The 3 inches is to account for the width of my router base, which I know is 6 inches, so 3 inches off center on each side. 3/4 is normally half of 1.5. However, because I'm using a 1 1/4 bit, I have to subtract half the width of the bit. So 1/4 inch bit minus half, 1/8 inch. So I subtract 1/8 inch, so that gives me 5/8. So 3 5/8 on either side. It's simple math, and you have to think about these things when you're using your router bits. So now I'm ready to just cut the slot. I'm always nervous when I do that the first time. I'm just waiting for something to come out of alignment on me. But in this case, nothing came out of alignment. My hole is cut directly center on the line that we laid down a couple of clips ago. So now I'm ready to do the other side. Now this side I did with a 1/4 inch. The other side I'm going to go with a 3/8, and that's going to be a little bit wider, about 2 inches wide, because I'll go a little bit wider when I'm working with the 3/8 and thicker material. Both my mortise slots cut now. Now to complete the top, what I need to do is I need to mark center lines down inside the mortise slot so I know how to align the workpiece when I get it in there. Now what I do for the long ways direction is I kind of eyeball where center is going to be, kind of off where the arch in the cut is, and I just put a little mark down there that I can see. There I am. There we go. A little black mark at the bottom of at the top of the arch. Now along the edges for the short ways here, what I do is I just take one of my squares, square it up, and align it with the center line that I've already got on the workpiece. And I've already done that one. There's one I haven't done yet. So from the back side, or from the front side, it really doesn't matter, but as long as I get it lined up, I will line it up on the line. Make sure it's flat against the back side. just line it up like that. So now, when we look in there, you see there's a line the lengthwise. So we're almost done. Now to finish this guy up, we have to build the steady rest. Now the steady rest really isn't difficult. As a matter of fact, I've already cut out a piece that will do the job for me. And I've marked it for where the holes for the quick releases are going to go. The tie down quick releases. And then the holes where the workpiece clamp is going to go. So it's just a matter of drilling those holes, mounting it up, and then we're ready to go. Okay, so you see the build is really easy. I mean, it's all butt joints aside from the rails and the slots for adjusting the tabletop. Now, this is my second prototype. And you see, it doesn't have quick releases. This guy's got carriage bolts, including for the top. So carriage bolts and homemade knobs. So if you didn't happen to own a bike shop at one time in your life and you don't have these kind of parts hanging around, carriage bolts are the next best thing. Okay, we're just about ready to set up, or to cut our joint here. But there's a little bit of setup you have to do still. I mean, you don't have to do quite the measuring as in measuring out the whole joint on the workpiece. But you still have to do the length center line and the width center line. So, yeah, so we cut center. Now what I do is I've got marks, as I showed you during the setup there. I've got marks on the inside of the joint for the horizontal center and the vertical center. So I match those up to the workpiece. It's mounted down underneath. And then just as a test, once I've got everything locked down, as a test, I'll take my joint, I'll just touch my bit down to the workpiece, and it should leave me a light circle, just, you know, where I just tapped. And I should see that the center line going through the dead center of that circle. That means I've got my tabletop set up properly. And I always start with the edge grain and not the end grain, because once I've got the edge grains set up, I then have as far as table adjustment, then I've got the edge grain set up too, and it's much easier to see on the edge grain. Okay, 3 3/8. I am ready to cut my joint. So now it's just a matter of plunge cuts. Oh, I also do have to set 0 on my router. So that is 0, so I'm going to move him up and set him to 0. And I want to go down to a depth of 1 inch. So this is what we're doing. Okay, that's not bad. Now, this piece happens to have a little warp in it, so to make it straight, I had to add an extra clamp on the end. But that's okay, you have to do that sometimes. So, there's my mortise, and it's right dead on the center line. So, I'm happy about that. Now let's do the end grain, and that takes another little bit of setup, and I'll show you when I'm done. Here we are ready to do an end grain cut. And you can see I've turned my steady rest vertical. So I'm still using the clamp on the steady rest, and I'm still using the quick releases. It's just sitting vertical. And then I've added one more adjustable piece that has another clamp on it. So that piece is clamped down. It's not going anywhere. And the best part is when I get it set up here, we are still on center. The length of our cut remains the same, And yeah, so now all I have to do is make the cut. Okay, here's my loose tenon, and it's nothing more than a piece of stock that I've cut down to 1/4 inch thick, 1 inch wide, and 1 7/8 inches long. So now we got our 2 work pieces, and there it is. I mean, it's a nice tight square joint. There's a square. Okay, when the thing's put together, you see it's a nice square joint. I've been using these for the past 2 beds, and they work out great. Once they're glued up, you got a ton of gluing surface. So once they're glued up, they're not moving a bit. I don't use any other hardware in building the bed, except for what it takes to join the major pieces together so we can take it apart and move it to, you know, new locations, new bedrooms, apartments, whatever. So there we go. A loose tenon mortise cutter, or you know, you can use this for mortise and tenon if you really want to cut tenons on a piece of a work piece. I'm just not that skilled or really gung ho to do it that way. So yeah, this will do it for today. And well, maybe in another month I'll have another one coming up for a piece that'll fit the shopsmith. So until then, you all keep up the good fight, and I'll see you when I see you.